You know, some folks drift into a narcissist's life like background noise, passing shadows, barely noticed, barely missed. But you were a storm that rewrote the sky. You didn't just walk through the door, they felt you in their bones. You cracked open the floorboards, peeled back the wallpaper of their lies, and forced light into places they swore would never see daylight. You weren't another fan in the cheap seats clapping for their performance. No, sir. You were the one in the front row with eyes wide open and questions they never wanted to answer. You didn't buy the sob stories wrapped in charm and dipped in manipulation. You stood there, grounded, seeing right through the act, and calling it for what it was. You didn't stay because you were blind or broken. You stayed because love meant something to you. Because loyalty still matters in your world. You stayed when it was hard, not because you lacked strength, but because you had too much of it. You loved with a backbone. You loved like it was your birthright. Fiercely, truly, unapologetically. And that terrified the narcissist more than they'll ever say out loud. You weren't just a reflection, they've got mirrors for that. You were the kind of mirror that tells the truth. The kind that doesn't flatter, doesn't lie, but holds up everything they've tried to bury. Those cracks they covered in compliments, those empty places dressed in performance. You reflected their hunger, their hollowness, and that truth, it rattled them. You see, the narcissist couldn't twist you like they did the others. Couldn't fit you into their little puppet show. Because somewhere along the way, you woke up. You stopped dancing to their tune. You stopped over-explaining, over-giving, overstaying. And when you got quiet, when you pulled the plug on the circus, that silence, that thundered louder than any rage, you stopped feeding the illusion, and they were left staring into the echo chamber of their own emptiness. And let me tell you something, they noticed. Oh, they might have slapped on a new smile, grabbed a replacement, posted the happy pictures. But underneath, every smile was a tremble. Every new supply was a pale copy, a paper ghost. Because once someone's tasted real, every imitation just reminds them of what they lost. You weren't a chapter in their story, you were the plot twist. The one that haunts the reruns. The one their soul remembers when the room goes quiet. They don't talk about it, but you're the standard now. The one they measure all the others against, and none of them stack up. And now, as someone who's helped hundreds recover from this kind of soul-twisting warfare, I want you to hear this loud and clear. If you're still carrying the weight of what happened, you're not crazy. You were just real. Real in a world that couldn't hold it. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through 6 signs, clear as day, that you were the one the narcissist never got over. Let's get into it. Number 1, you were their shelter, and then just like that, you took the shelter away. Let's not sugarcoat this. The narcissist never expected to find comfort in another human soul. But you were different. You didn't come crashing in like a storm. You came in like a sunrise. Quiet, warm, safe. Not with fanfare, not with force. You just were. And for someone who's lived their whole life behind locked doors, that kind of presence is disarming. They never said it. Never would. Vulnerabilities foreign in their world, a threat to be destroyed, not a language to be spoken. But when their carefully curated world began to tremble, when the spotlight faded and the applause ran dry, they came to you. Not with open arms, but with silent desperation. Because for the first time, they tasted what peace felt like. Not performance, not pretense. Just peace. And that was you. The steady one. The soul that didn't need fixing or faking. The refuge they never thought they needed, until you were gone. See, the narcissist didn't lose you in one grand moment. It was slower, subtle. They chipped away at your kindness, mistook your compassion for compliance. And when they pushed, again and again, convinced you'd always be there, you did something they didn't expect. You left. Not with rage, not with drama, but with a quiet, bone-deep knowing. You stopped being the place they could land. You stopped being the light in their storm. And let me tell you, that silence, it still rings in their ears. They try to replace it. They try. But the next person doesn't feel the same. Doesn't see them like you did. There's no magic in the air anymore, just static. Because you weren't just a person. You were presence. You were the feeling of home, and you gave it without condition. Now that it's gone, they can't recreate it. They can't fake it. They can't buy it. And they're starving. Not for you, but for what they lost when they lost you. Number 2, they're chasing ghosts, and you are the ghost they can't outrun. Let me put this plain, they thought you were replaceable. Thought they could grab the next pretty smile, the next quiet shadow who wouldn't question the script. They thought all it took was someone new, someone easier, someone who claps on command and never dares to ask, "Is that really who you are?" But what they didn't understand is this: you didn't offer surface-level sweetness. You offered soul. You saw past the mask, not because they earned it, not because they begged for it, but because your spirit can't help but see what others overlook. You didn't just listen, you felt. You didn't just hear their stories, you read the silence between the words. You were stillness in a room full of noise, and that scared the hell out of them. Because with you, they weren't on stage anymore. They weren't the character, the brand, the illusion. They were just them. Raw. Flawed. Real. And in your gaze, they felt human for a split second. Not worshipped. Not managed. Known. But they shattered it. Whether by pride, by habit, or by fear, they broke what they couldn't comprehend. And now they're scrolling through old photos like they're treasure maps, watching your light from the shadows, trying to steal a spark to warm their cold little kingdom. They don't miss your attention. No, they miss your presence. That deep, soul-drenching presence that made them feel, maybe for the first time, that they didn't have to perform. And here's the truth they'll never say out loud. They still look for you in everyone else. But you don't happen twice. Number 3, they laughed at your depth because they were drowning in it. You've heard it, haven't you? That you're too much, too emotional, too sensitive. Like those are flaws to be fixed instead of the miracles they are. They smirked when your voice trembled, rolled their eyes when your soul ached. But beneath the mockery, there was need, desperate, gnawing need. Because your sensitivity, it wasn't weakness. It was radar. You could sense their storms before they even formed. You felt every shift in their energy, every silent scream they tried to hide. You bent without breaking. You held space without asking. You carried what they couldn't name. You didn't just react, you responded. From love, from empathy, from a sacred place they never dared step into themselves. And they fed on it. They soaked it in. You became the emotional compass in their world of chaos. And because they couldn't control that power, they tried to belittle it, tried to shrink it. But now that it's gone, now that you're not there to soften the sharp edges, to speak to the silence, to love them beyond the noise, the world feels hollow. Their laughter echoes, but it's empty. Their words land, but no one hears the ache beneath them. Nobody else speaks the unspoken. Nobody else feels the unseen. You were too much. No, you were everything. Number 4, your depth made their circus look like a joke. Let's not tiptoe around it. Narcissists don't live in the deep. They paddle around in the kiddie pool, splashing in attention, approval, and surface-level drama like it's gold. Compliments, control, smoke, mirrors, that's their currency. But you didn't just walk into the room. You brought a depth they couldn't fake, couldn't touch, and sure as hell couldn't follow. You showed up with soul, with questions that couldn't be dodged, with honesty that burned through the haze. You were substance in a world built on image. And in your presence, their tricks looked cheap, their masks slipped, their illusions cracked. You weren't fooled by charm or distracted by the show. You saw the sleight of hand and chose to speak truth anyway. And that made you dangerous. Because when someone's built their identity on performance, Truth is poison. You weren't just deep, you were vast. You didn't splash around their shallow waters, you were the ocean. And now they're back to their old games, pulling the same tired strings with people who can't even float, much less swim. And inside, whether they admit it or not, they know they had something rare, and they let it drown in their fear. Number 5, your strength broke their script in half. You want to know what really undid them? It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was your resilience. See, most people eventually fold. The constant push, the silent sabotage, the manipulation, it eats away at a person until they're just echoes of who they used to be. But you didn't fold. You didn't even flinch. Every time they tried to chip away at your sense of self, you got sharper. Every guilt trip, every twisted half-truth just cleared more fog from your mind. You didn't fight like they expected. You rose in silence. Strong, certain, awake. And that terrified them, because narcissists thrive on control. But there you were, unmoved, unshaken, unpredictable. You didn't need revenge. You had clarity. You didn't need to prove a point. Your peace said everything. You walked away, not because you were defeated, but because you outgrew the game. You became the one that got away, the wild card they couldn't decode. And somewhere, deep in their restless spirit, they know they'll never find that kind of quiet power again. Number 6, your empathy was the sword they couldn't steal. This one hurts, because the narcissist thought they had you pegged. Thought your empathy was just another lever to pull. Guilt, pity, obligation, they've used those tricks 100 times. But your empathy wasn't soft. It was sharp. You didn't just feel, you understood. You didn't just react, you read. You saw through them like glass. Underneath the bravado, the charm, the manipulation, you saw the ache, the fear, the scramble for control. And you loved anyway. Not blindly, not foolishly, but deeply, with eyes wide open. And that made you powerful. Because they couldn't twist your empathy into a leash. They couldn't turn your love into a trap. You knew when to give and when to walk. You didn't need them to be whole. You didn't beg. You didn't break. You simply stopped offering yourself to someone who only took. And now, they're left fumbling in the dark. They try to recreate what they had with you, but the light doesn't come back. Because what they miss isn't just your kindness, it's your clarity. Your presence, the way your soul saw theirs and didn't run. You weren't just a support system. You were the lighthouse, the compass, the only real thing in a world they built on sand. And now that you're gone, that world's crumbling. That's where we'll leave it today. But before you go, if something in this spoke to the storm you've walked through, let it rise. Let yourself feel the truth of it. And if you're still somewhere in the rubble, still brushing dust from your shoulders, hear me on this. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not broken. You were the miracle in the middle of someone else's masquerade. So if this landed, if it lit something up inside you, drop it in the comments. Tell me what part rang true. And if you're finding your way forward, if you're reclaiming your story piece by piece, don't walk it alone. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. Because you're healing. It's not just possible, it's coming. And when it does, it won't whisper. It'll roar. You've survived the storm. Now it's time to heal like hell.